Hello, everybody. How are you doing today? This is your host, Tyler, and this is the second episode of the Yugioh Duelist Podcast. Okay, so it has been a while since I've been able to sit down and do a recording for this, unfortunately. A couple things have been going on in my life and just had to put some focus towards that, but we are back. We are here for the second episode. For the second episode today, we are going to be going over ban list discussions, things that people have been talking about, and a couple things here and there that I might be um, advocating for specifically for this ban list. We are going to be going over in person events at the very end and talking about anticipation for that. And we are also going to be going over these alternative formats that Konami recently introduced into the game that they will be supporting on the OTS level or official tournament store level. And honestly, those I'm very much excited to talk about. Um, all of it I'm excited to talk about, but talking about alternative formats is definitely something that people have been wanting to go over and have for a while, so that'll be fun to go over and discuss. But hope you tune in for everything in general, and we will be getting into our first little discussion here. Okay, so we have a good couple of things to go over in regards to the ban list discussion. And the first one that we'll be going over here is the good old boy in the thumbnail, or to some people, the not so good boy. And that is the discussion surrounding Verte. So, the first part of that I wanted to go over was um, the boss monsters that Verte enables. Then I'll go into the fusion spells and then Verte itself. So, for the boss monsters, I don't think some people have been clamoring for like hitting the boss monsters specifically that Verte is enabling, and I don't think that is the best idea to go with. The only reason I say that is because boss monsters are just something that Yu-Gi-Oh has, whether that be like with Dark Arm Dragon or Chaos Emperor Dragon, Blackluster Soldier, um, like even in later years type of stuff, like say for Burning Abyss, it's Beatrice, or something like more modern day with Double A Zeus. Whatever example you can think of as a big boss monster in the modern game, or in older days. Um, Boss monsters are just something that is part of Yu-Gi-Oh, and you can go back and forth on whether they are fair enough for the game or a little bit too overpowered for the game or whatever it might be. But the the fact that to me the boss monsters specifically are not the thing that is the problem. They can be worked around in some way, shape, and form. I think DPE like leads to its own specific discussion just because of the way it is as a card. But at least with Dragoon, there's not a lot of decks that are playing it right now. It's not completely destroying and tearing up the meta and just making everything a big hassle and a problem. And at least currently, I do understand that there was some decks that were doing it prior, and maybe that could lead to the discussion of getting rid of something surrounding it specifically if it becomes more of a problem. But in regards to just the monsters themselves, I'm perfectly fine with decks and strategies having a big boss monster that they can just sit on and, just have as basically the kind of like ride or die kind of gameplay style of, if you haven't outed this thing, then I'm probably in a good position. If you have outed it, I'm probably not in that good of a position. Regardless, I do think it is. I don't think it is the boss monster that specifically should be approached in terms of going on the ban list. The next thing to talk about from there is the fusion spells. Now, specifically with the big two, which is Dragoon and Phoenix Enforcer. With Dragoon specifically, the Red Eyes fusion is just very, very, like, weak in comparison to other fusion spells. Essentially, if in a hypothetical situation, saying like Verte is gone, it is the only thing that you can do for the turn. So you're only putting up Dragoon essentially, and if it's not the only thing you're doing, then like say they Ash Blossom the fusion spell, for example, like you essentially just wasted a turn. And even then, if you're going second, it's possibly just bait for a specific interaction that your opponent has, which, not horrible in that sense, that it can still do that, but at the same time, it's just not as good. And, it's just like with a hypothetical situation of Verte being gone, that just doesn't make that spell good enough, warranting to play Dragoon in anything that isn't just a slow control deck, which would still be theoretically a problem, but at that point, I'm perfectly fine with it. With Fusion Destiny and Phoenix Enforcer, it's a little bit different because you can still play 3 of that card, play it at the end of a turn, and then still be fine, which I can understand, like, would um, be a little bit controversial to some people. It just seems that even then it hasn't really done anything, and it's still an extremely insane kind of card that you can bring out, which is fair. But at the same time, I would still rather them have to open it, search for it, whatever you're doing with it, besides having access to it from the extra deck, as along with it. So now they have the like 3-to-2 ratio of either opening the Fusion Destiny or the 2 bricks that you have in the deck, and at that point, I would think that would be a better situation than um, trying to like get rid of the fusion spell specifically, because there could be other ways of being able, probably not those monsters specifically, but there could be other ways of just finding ways to abuse other fusion spells specifically because of Verte. And speaking of Verte, I do think, in all honesty, that is probably the correct hit, by thinking about it from a more critical standpoint of the cards and cards surrounding it specifically that people are typically talking about. Just being able to essentially just extremely generically send any fusion spell or polymerization card, and being able to bring out these insane cards just for basically any 2 monsters is kind of crazy. And Verte only can only get more and more insane as time goes on. And even if the things coming out currently, like the branded fusion or that new zombie fusion, aren't as abusable with it, it still doesn't mean that it doesn't already have like insane amounts of application with it, with its with the cards that it can send. Like even something simpler like Super Poly or Shaddoll Fusion, like those cards are still crazy in themselves of what they can do specifically. And with something like Super Poly, it's not as crazy, but still the fact that it can just like out like basically any card that your opponent has just generically, it's cool. But even then, I would just rather it not be in the game to have those kind of applications. I do think in a general sense it's a good designed card for what it is for the archetype, but like I mean, I haven't seen any Predaplant decks that have been able to see success because of that card being out. I've seen plenty of other decks be able to see success because of Dragoon, Phoenix Enforcer, stuff like that. So, but Unfortunately, it has failed in its own archetype. But regardless of that, I think Verite would probably be the most appropriate hit for that entire engine. And from there, the other big thing that I wanted to go over was Imperial Order. So to me specifically, Imperial Order is probably one of the most oppressive floodgates right now, and it's at one copy. And that's absolutely crazy. We've seen so many crazy wins just off the back of this one card, and it's absolutely crazy, even with its errata. Honestly, the errata isn't really even an errata. It's still just absolutely crazy, even to this day. And, I don't really understand how Konami thought in any way, shape, or form that that card could come back in any capacity. Now, I fully understand that on a more competitive scene, it hasn't seen as much play back when it first came off to where it is now. I can fully understand that, but that doesn't mean it wasn't stupid back then and stupid now as well. It's still just a ridiculous card. And I know some people will look at it from the standpoint of, oh, we have skill drain, we have royal decree, those things also take out 1/3 of the card pool, what's the problem? And the big problem and issue with it is that these spell cards, at least currently, are probably the most important aspects and types of card in the game currently. Monsters are obviously important. Monsters are basically how you do everything. But the thing is, not every deck can play skill drain. Not every deck can just make a big board, flip skill drain, and then just be perfectly fine from there. You could go up against a deck that doesn't care about skill drain, or even if you do flip skill drain, your opponent could probably just still have some kind of play and be able to go around the skill drain just as easily. And skill drain, if you're in a big monster combo heavy deck, then that card is just essentially useless, because you just turn off every kind of interaction that you have against your opponent, which to me just doesn't seem worth it. And just in general, you just can't play that card as easily. Royal Decree, you have a little bit of a better argument for, that every deck could theoretically play it except for trap decks. But even then, it's not as generically ubiquitous in comparison to Imperial Order. Whereas Imperial Order, you can essentially guarantee that at least 90 to 95% of your matchups are going to go perfectly fine by having that card in your main deck. You can't really have that same kind of guarantee in comparison to Royal Decree, because Royal Decree only stops trap cards, which not a lot of people play trap decks or a lot of trap cards in their deck except for Infinite Impermanence. And just in general, it's not as generic and overall oppressive in comparison to Imperial Order in terms of an overall metagame. It's definitely those three in general are extremely oppressive in what they do, but in comparison to where we are in the current game right now, Imperial Order is just way too absurd. You can't the way you can't put those two cards, the Skill Drain and the Royal Decree, in any deck, you can put Imperial Order into literally anything that you can think of. I've seen Imperial Order run in Salamangreat. I've seen Imperial Order run in big combo decks that just end on 3 or 4 negates and just have that alongside it. We've obviously seen it in Tri Brigade. It became sort of its own meme that it was the best Tri Brigade card for a little bit. We've seen it in just any modern trap deck. We've seen it just in basically anything. There's very few decks I have seen that have not been able to utilize that on a more competitive level. And there's even been combos surrounding it where you have been able to just like do send it to the graveyard with Curious and then grab it back with Nightmare Griffin. Like, and people did that specifically because spell cards in this game are pretty insane, and turning them off is really, really good. And like I said, especially right now, like the big things that are helping people play in this format are spell cards: Forbidden Droplet, Dark Ruler No More, Forbidden Chalice, stuff like Fusion Destiny, even other good generic cards here and there, things like Triple Tactics Talent, Pot of Prosperity, all kinds of other stuff that you could name off spell card wise that are helping people play in this format, and just being able to help people get to consistency, be able to break boards, whatever it might be. Just in general, Imperial Order is just extremely, extremely dumb for right now. And to me, it just doesn't make sense that for anyone to say that that card is still perfectly fine for right now, and that there's other things that Konami needs to focus on. Like, you're right that Konami has like higher priorities, but that is still on the priority list of things that they need to address. But if it doesn't get addressed this list, I kind of don't think that they're going to in general, which would kind of suck, because we've seen way more in this modern, in this more modern setting, that Imperial Order has been winning games just left and right, that we have seen recorded, we've seen from, anecdotal evidence. It's just such a crazy card for what it is, even with the errata. And that's the only thing that I think Konami would keep it around for, because if they ban it after they give it an errata, that would be, kind of an admission that, hey, even with this errata, we couldn't really fix this card. And I think it would be the first card that got in Yu-Gi-Oh! That got an errata and came back and then got banned again. I don't know specifically off the top of my head if that's true or not, if that were to happen, but I think that it would be the first card, if I'm not mistaken. Someone correct me in the comments. But regardless, that's my big rant for Imperial Order. From there's a couple of things people were clamoring for, because there is a couple of Floodgate-esque cards that people are wanting to see go from the format. Have a little list here. Just looking at stuff that with Scythe, Harpy's Featherstorm, Protos, I guess you could say Schism as well. Those are the big ones I wanted to discuss for that. So with Scythe, I personally think that Scythe and Dagda both should go. I understand Dagda is probably more so the problem card rather than Scythe. I would just rather Scythe go as well, that way it's not abused in the future. If Dagda goes, we can't grab it from deck. If Scythe goes, then we don't have any future worry of having to worry about the Scythe lock ever again. And honestly, that would be perfectly fine, at least to me, for those two cards. Not really any more to say for those. Protos, the only reason I don't think Protos would get hit right now is specifically because it is being used in a modern deck very recently, and it hasn't really had any time to quote-unquote shine in any previous format. That's the only reason I think it would not get banned. I do think it still should, because to me, like, just even initially, that card being released, I'm surprised no one ever broke that card prior, because Protoss and its counterpart Eschatos, both of those cards were just absolutely crazy to me just reading them, because we currently right now have a generic way for both of those cards to just hit anything. Now, granted, both of them are not very good in game one situations, but like the fact that they can just completely shut down a specific type or attribute in both of their respective ways, like that to me is just absolutely absurd. And I definitely think that if definitely think that at some point in time, both of those cards should see the ban list. And it would be unfortunate if it's at a time where they have never had, like, the time of day to be abused. But to me, at the same time, like, just their existence already is just extremely dumb. And I would just rather see them go. The other card was Harpy's Featherstorm. That card is just absurd, in all honesty. I understand that it's only really a side deck card, but still, that card's crazy. Like, I do not understand in any way, shape, or form why that is not, like, archetype locked to Harpies. I do not understand. Like, I guess you can't, it's, like, you can't even make the excuse that it's, like, because of Harpy's pet dragon, because it still has Harpies in the name. I was gonna say that was, like, the reason that they didn't have it like that, but even then, you can't make that excuse, because it still has the archetype name. Like, literally every there's probably, like, a couple here, like, obscure archetype cards that from the older days that make it to where that don't have Harpy in their archetype name or in their name at all. But even then, like, I don't think that's an excuse. Like, just it should have been, like, Harpy specifically. The fact that it isn't, like, that just makes it absolutely absurd. Even besides, like, with Bird Up, Flunderies can play it. Any other, like, relevant deck that ever comes up later on can play that card. Just in general, it's just crazy. And honestly, I would much rather see it go. It's just very stupid. Like, the only thing you can really do against that card is, like, trap deck, or if you just have, like, a big bunch of beaters. And that's about it. Like, just being able to turn off your opponent's turn is pretty cool, you know? And the only other one that's, like, in the Floodgate discussion is Schism. I know some people were also talking about Tikaboo more recently, but I don't really see them, like, touching that card specifically, but Schism or Apkallone, I can definitely see having some kind of application in their thought process for the ban list. To me, Schism is would probably be the better hit. I don't really know specifically. It's kind of weird to me, because the biggest reason that it is such a problem is because of the Dogmatica stuff. And the thing that gets to Schism is Apkallone specifically. So to me, it would probably make the most sense if they hit Apkallone, but that still leaves Winder around. But at the same time, at that point, like, invoked Dogmatica cannot play the literally 1 card shit hole package, and 2 card extra deck package for Windows specifically. And at that point, I would say that would probably be perfectly fine. But I know to some people that might not be fine. It would, I don't know. Like, Shaddoll right now is not as oppressive or played as much as it was just even a little bit ago. So theoretically, it would kind of be in a fine spot for right now, even if Schism was, even if Schism wasn't banned. But I can see an argument for like all 3 of the cards that are in that specific discussion, like Winda, Schism, or App Cologne. I could see people making an argument for all of them. If it were me, I would say probably the best thing to hit would probably be Schism. That way it's not a future problem in case of searching it or something. I guess you could also just say outright ban Winda, but, you know, I I'm not trying to defend that card specifically, but that is one of the few cards that Shaddoll has that keeps it afloat for the most part. So, and if that's the only deck abusing the card, I would kind of be fine with it. But regardless of that, I would still say Schism for the most part. And from there, I think there's only what is it? Hulk combo type stuff. Not really sure on that. I would. It's weird because right now, like, the Hulk combo is just not utilized in any way, shape, or form whatsoever, even though it's literally 3 negates. But I don't think that's an excuse not to put it. I don't think that's not an excuse to not have something hit from it. Honestly, to me, Auroradon's the bigger problem because it's the one that gives like so all the advantage and makes it so you can finalize the crazy synchro combo stuff. But I could definitely see them taking Hulk out eventually because of the absurdity it has. But I mean, sometimes it's just another body. It's just linked to summon a third guy, essentially. Like, to link climb into, like, Unicorn or something like that. It's not as oppressive as it was initially, whenever we had, like, Synchro Eldritch and stuff. And even then, like, the bigger problem in that was Auroradon. So, I don't know. I would probably say Auroradon, and if they're really, really fearing, bringing back like generic tuner monsters, then get rid of Hulk. Get rid of both of them, honestly. Like, if they really want to. So that's the only thing I can really say for that. I haven't really put too much thought into the Hulk combo type stuff because it hasn't really been relevant for a while. Only other things from there to discuss is like stuff people might want back from the ban list, and I do have a sort of chaotic and slash kind of wild pick that I would kind of be interested to see come back from the ban list. Realistically, in all honesty, there's a whole bunch of cards that Konami could just easily bring back from the ban list, and it'd be perfectly fine. Like, there's just so much fluff on the ban list right now that it's just kind of all over the place. I think it's just more so there for because Konami is lazy in some aspects. Besides that, though, cards that I think, or cards not that I think, the cards that some people have been talking about and wanting back, The big ones I have been hearing here and there is Harp and Colossus. Harp specifically, I think, is kind of fine to come back. I don't really see it making that big of an impact. The biggest thing that's kind of stupid with it is that it summons Girsu from deck, and Girsu is kind of crazy. It just in itself. Um, but even then, I don't see it making that big of an impact with everything. It does have Rusty Bardish again, and we do have kind of crazy things we can still do with that deck, but I'm not sure necessarily if it would 100% be as oppressive as it used to be, especially with what we have right now. Not 100% sure, but regardless, I think it should be fine. Colossus, though, that is a no go. Colossus is way too oppressive for this, even for this current day and age. I think it's been 2 years at this point since it left. But even then, I, I, it is just way too good. That's all I can really say about it. Like, it's an oppressive floodgate. It protects itself. It helps facilitate, like, a big end board boss monster for its archetype. And even then, it can be abused in other decks just as easily. Like, the fact that that is possible is just absolutely ridiculous. And just in general, it's just an absolutely ridiculous card. I do understand that we do have counterplay a little bit more in comparison right now to what we had before, but I don't think that makes up I don't think that's enough of an excuse to not or to bring it back in into the metagame. I would much rather just see that card stay on the ban list. And honestly, I would probably say that that card's going to stay on the ban list for a very long time, if not forever. So that's just my take. It's just a really, really stupid card. I do enjoy it. Like, I played the deck, and I really do enjoy that deck. But still very dumb. And I just remembered the main card that people like to talk about literally every ban list season, Maxi. I don't know how I specifically forgot about that. Especially considering that is literally the most talked about card every ban list season, but I don't really have too much to say about it, in all honesty. I'm like 50-50 literally on if it can come back or if it can't. I get that it's stupid, but I can also see the argument as to why it's like kind of okay. You know, don't I don't necessarily care in all honesty as to where it is anymore. Like, if the only thing I do care about specifically with that card is that if it comes back, it has to be at 3. It can't be at 1 or 2, because we either see as many copies of Maxi as possible or we see no copies of Maxi. That's just honestly how they should do it if it ever comes back. TCG Konami has a weird way of doing cards that they bring off the ban list, because they usually bring it at slow increments, like 1 to 2 to 3. But if they ever bring that back, it has to be at 3. That is the only card that they can. That's one of the few cards ever that they have to do from 0 to 3 if they ever bring it back. That's the only thing I'm going to say about that, though. And the last thing here for any kind of ban list discussion is a chaotic pick that they could bring back that would be kind of interesting. And that, to me, would actually be reasoning. I don't know necessarily if reasoning would have large applications in a lot of decks except for Infernoid. But I think it would be interesting to see where it goes and what people can do with it in current day and age in comparison to where it was before. I think, yeah, the big reasoning got hit was because it was used in Infernoid and Cosmo. Cosmo had a very fun time with that card as well. And honestly, reasoning can be kind of an insane extender in a lot of cases, especially if your like deck just has levels all over the place. But I would definitely be interested to see what people do with it in a current day and age. Maybe it's a little too good still, but if we were to like completely like shake up things, that's kind of why I call it the chaotic one, because in theory it doesn't sound like crazy, but it would probably find some way to be crazy, but it would still be interesting to see back. Just kind of just kind of find a way to destroy everything. The big thing I'm thinking about like right now off the top of my head is Eldritch, specifically abusing that card, but I don't know, like it would I can't really think of anything else that would like go crazy with that. And even then, you would have to find some way to build the Eldritch deck that would be a little more appropriate to having that card in the deck. Even then, besides that, not really sure. But that is the end of our ban list discussion portion here. Probably going to be the longest section of all of it, to be honest. But we'll be now moving into our discussion surrounding the alternative formats. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, Konami has also now started to officially support alternative formats and retro formats. And I wanted to discuss the three that people think are going to be the most influential, most played, whatever you want to call it, out of the list of ones that we got that will be officially supported. And that is Common Charity, Time Wizard, which is basically just retro formats, and Deckmaster. I'll be going over them in terms of what I think will have the least success to the ones that I think will have the most success. And starting out, the one that I think will have the least amount of success is Deckmaster. Unfortunately, Deckmaster is just broken right out the gate because you have so many stupid and oppressive monsters in the game that have weird or extremely oppressive floodgate effects. Things like Inspector Boarder, Jinzo, Spell Canceller, Last Warrior from Another Planet, like all kinds of stuff like that. And each of those are just absolutely ridiculous, and the format just in itself is just essentially broken from there. Like you just you can't even there's just so many of them that people could play or have access to that just makes everything so much more absurd and ridiculous in that format, and you just don't really have anything that you can do about it. Because even if you get rid of those extremely oppressive ones, there's a second class of cards that basically just fulfill the role, just kind of in a weaker spot. Things like big boss monsters that have negates, or stuff that is just extremely oppressive. Like that put like big unaffected monsters is what I'm trying to say. Stuff like that. Just overall, there's still just so many crazy monsters that you would have, and essentially you'd have to make this gigantic ban list of things that you cannot use as deck masters in order to even like try to make it balanced. It just kind of sucks that just right out the gate that format just doesn't really have anything going for it, and it just really sucks because it's probably one of the more interesting things that we could have in it as an alternative format. Because there's things that you could have like Grand Maju or Bountiful Artemis, cool unsearchable like quote unquote boss monsters or just unsearchable monsters that you have that are good for a specific strategy, that are helpful and to what you're trying to do, but now you don't have to search them or draw into them or whatever it might be. They're just there. And honestly, to me, those are the best. Those to me are the best ones. And I wish that that was the only thing that it was used for, or maybe just a monster that someone enjoys the most or whatever it might be. But unfortunately, there's just so many stupid monsters out there that you could basically just have like a ban list of like 600 plus monsters that easily are broken in that format, unfortunately. So that's the one I think isn't going to see the most success, unfortunately. The one that I think is going to kind of be in the middle is the Common Charity. Common Charity is honestly extremely interesting to me because it's basically something that is easily able to be expanded upon just within the reprints of the card pool or just structure decks or whatever it might be. And it's something that like Konami is already going to be giving us in like as reprints or whatever it might be for a format, but it's also like supporting an alternative format, which is pretty cool, just outright for like product type of things. But also, Common Charity is pretty cool because it lets like some lower tier strategies have like shining moments and be able to do something, which is also pretty cool. I think the format right now is I think the best deck currently is Tenyi. It's either that or Goki. I'm not really 100% sure. I think Goki is a little more like solved right now and people are playing outs easily to it. But it kind of, I would say it probably fluctuates between those two, which is kind of interesting. And even then, like, there's not really that much stuff that's going on that's kind of absurd or overly crazy, which is cool. Um, but even then, it just has its own meta, which is pretty interesting. Just right out the gate with that as well. The only thing that I would kind of be interested to like find out about, or that I would have a question about, is mainly how they consider a card common, because I can understand that if it's like classified as a rare, or if it is a rare, like that has the like silver shiny letters on it, then that's not a common. That makes sense. But like to like there's some things out there like Shatterfoil or Starfoil rares that are like they look common but they have that like small little shine to them. So are those common? um that's the main question I would only really have about that, in terms of what is allowed for the card pool. I don't think it makes that big of a difference in necessarily 100%, but it would be important to find out about that specifically. So that's one thing with it. Um, and in all honesty, that's honestly it for it, because there's not really too much more I wanted to discuss about the Common Charity specifically. I do think it's a fun and interesting format that you can have, and I'll be very glad to see where it goes and see if we specifically get any kind of focus towards it or other formats in product releases. Um, the only other one that I wanted to discuss here was the Time Wizard or retro formats, and to me, those are the ones that are going to be the the most like played or seen as quote unquote alternative formats within a locals that you will see. The main thing is going to be goat format, which is why I got the little scapegoats on thumbnail here. And um, I don't know. Like I think goat format is personally I think goat format is overrated, not underrated. I think it's overrated in comparison to other alternative formats, but that'll probably be the most popular. And if that's the most popular, it's perfectly fine. It's not really anything that is an overtly big deal in terms of of it being an alternative format. I'm perfectly fine with it. Um, I would be interested to see more of a like Edison plant format type thing going on, because the only thing I really think is kind of stupid in that format is royal oppression. Otherwise, I think the format is kind of fine, which is pretty cool. I would honestly, I'd honestly prefer if that was the default like quote unquote alternative format that people played more often. But regardless, um, I just think those things are going to see the most success. It's historical formats. People are already playing them currently, just with on a casual end. But being able to go to a locals and bring those decks that you have been building throughout this time, it just seems cool to be able to do. And that's honestly it for that little section of discussion. Not really too much more to go over with all that. I'm just very happy that we're going to be getting those. I wish there was a little more that we had on a like quote unquote more like competitive esque scene, but I'm glad that there is like fun alternative formats as well. I think there definitely needs to be like a split between those two, and some that are kind of like in between. So, just glad for all that. I'm just very happy that we have those as an option now. Alright, and the last little section here that I wanted to go over was the events that are coming back for the 2022 season. I'm very glad and happy for this because um, we've been without in person play events for a long time now, and in all honesty, it's just very satisfying to hear that we can finally get back to those in person play events. I'm definitely clamoring for the times to see like top 32, top 16, top 8 deck profiles again for in person play, like at a higher tier event. And it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of that evolves through like the metagame, through deck choices, through like in all kinds of in person play stuff. And while there is still going to be like an online scene because of Master Duel, I definitely think that it's going to be a great thing to have that along with Master Duel, along with all these like alternative formats that I was just talking about, and just everything all together. It just seems like there's such a large amount of things that we can look forward to in anticipation for everything throughout this year. Um, it's just going to be so good for people to see friends that they haven't seen in a long time, to go to places that they have been wanting to travel to, and just everything surrounding it in general is just so great and amazing to hear about. And in all honesty, I'm just looking forward to everything that we can have with it and will have with it. Okay, a little post-production recording here. Unfortunately, from the time I initially recorded to the time we are at now, the first event back for in-person play has been canceled, unfortunately. And it seems like there have been other cancellations throughout the time leading up to now. So it is kind of unfortunate, but I do understand. We want to be as safe as we possibly can, at least, especially around when there's a lot of cases still floating around in a whole bunch of different places. And it could be, I don't know specifically what the reasoning for everything is. Maybe it's because of regulations within specific areas, but regardless of what it is, I do think it is better to be safe than sorry. So it is unfortunate, but I do hope that eventually we do get events at some point in time and in some way, shape, or form in-person play, and it'll be good to see it if we can at some point in 2022. I think at some point we will see it, but the worry for right now is probably still a little too much, and I can definitely understand not wanting to push the issue any further by gathering a whole bunch of people together. So just wanted to add that on here. Okay, so unfortunately, this is the end for our podcast for today. I kind of wish I had a little more to say about the events coming back, but I mean, not really that much I can really say about it, besides I'm glad that they're back. Besides that, though, I hope you all enjoyed everything that we talked about here today. Hope it was worth your while. Have a great day, evening, whatever it is, and I will see you all on the next episode. Thank you.